In May 2014, the government of Kenya signed a loan agreement with the Export-Import Bank of China worth $3.6 billion. The money would fund a brand new railway from the Indian Ocean port of Mombasa to the capital city of Nairobi, 472 kilometers inland. Construction started in December 2014. Thousands of Chinese engineers and 25,000 Kenyan workers poured concrete, laid steel, and blasted through volcanic rock across some of the roughest terrain in East Africa. By May 2017, the trains were running, 18 months ahead of schedule. But buried inside the loan contract was a clause that said Kenya could never tell anyone what it had agreed to. And a second clause that said if anything went wrong, the dispute would be settled in Beijing under Chinese law. The question nobody in Nairobi was asking in 2014 is the question everybody is asking now. What exactly did Kenya sign away? To understand why this railway exists, you have to understand what it replaced. The original rail line between Mombasa and Nairobi was built by the British Empire in 1901. People called it the Lunatic Express because so many workers died during construction, from disease, from lion attacks in Tsavo, from the brutal conditions of laying track through equatorial wilderness, that critics in the British Parliament thought the whole project was insane. The railway was not built for Kenyans. It was built to move British goods from the Indian Ocean coast to the interior of East Africa, to cement colonial control over rival European powers. Over 100 years later, that same narrow-gauge track was still in use. The trains were slower than they had been in the 1990s. By 2016, a passenger journey from Nairobi to Mombasa took an entire day, sometimes longer when the aging locomotives broke down on the tracks. Freight capacity was a fraction of what the Mombasa port needed. Trucks clogged the A109 highway between the coast and the capital, shredding the road surface and causing accidents that killed hundreds of Kenyans every year. The port of Mombasa, East Africa's busiest international trade gateway, was handling millions of tons of cargo that had no efficient way to reach the interior. Kenya needed a modern railway. Desperately. The question was who would build it. Western development banks weren't interested. The World Bank and the African Development Bank had studied East African rail networks for decades, commissioned reports, held conferences, and produced feasibility studies, but never committed the kind of money needed to actually build one. The numbers were too big, the political risks were too uncertain, the returns were too slow. China, on the other hand, was in the middle of the most aggressive infrastructure lending spree in modern history. The Belt and Road Initiative, launched by President Xi Jinping in 2013, was funneling billions of dollars in loans to developing nations across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Roads in Pakistan, ports in Sri Lanka, railways in Laos, power plants in Bangladesh. And Kenya, with its strategic Indian Ocean port and its position as the economic anchor of East Africa, was near the top of the list. China Road and Bridge Corporation, a subsidiary of the state-owned China Communications Construction Company, won the contract. The deal was straightforward on the surface. China Exim Bank would lend Kenya 90% of the project cost, and Kenya would cover the remaining 10%. CRBC would build the railway using Chinese standards, Chinese technology, and Chinese equipment. For the first 5 years after completion, a Chinese subsidiary called Africa Star Railway Operations Company would operate the trains. There was a technology transfer component too. CRBC set up training programs in Kenya for railway operation and engineering. About 18,000 Kenyans were sent to China for advanced training under the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. Top performers received scholarships for further study. Over 1,000 Kenyans worked at the foreman and middle management level during construction. On paper, this was supposed to be a partnership, not just a construction contract. But critics argued that the Chinese elements of the project accounted for roughly 60% of the total value, meaning most of the money Kenya borrowed from China went straight back to Chinese companies, Chinese suppliers, and Chinese workers. The loan never really came to Kenya, one activist told Voice of America. What came to Kenya was a debt. The engineering itself was staggering. The new standard gauge railway featured 98 bridges and viaducts to navigate the hills, valleys, and escarpments between the coast and the capital. The Athi River Superbridge stretched 2.6 kilometers across the floodplain, and it was the 6th longest bridge in Africa at the time of completion. Near the town of Mazeras, where the old colonial railway used a winding spiral to climb the hills, the standard gauge railway crossed the same terrain on 2 elevated bridges. The tallest rose 43.5 meters above the valley floor. through Tsavo National Park, where elephants, giraffes, and lions roam between the eastern and western sections of the reserve. The railway was built on elevated viaducts with 14 dedicated wildlife crossings and 150 underground culverts. The bridges were engineered with 7.5 meters of clearance so giraffes could walk beneath the tracks without ducking. The old meter gauge railway and the highway that ran parallel to it had been killing wildlife for decades. The SGR, for all its controversy, actually improved the situation. When the first fare-paying passengers boarded the Madaraka Express on June 1, 2017, the mood in Kenya was electric. The date was chosen deliberately. It was Madaraka Day, the anniversary of Kenya's self-rule from Britain. President Uhuru Kenyatta stood at the ceremony alongside Chinese officials, while a Kenyan orchestra performed Chinese patriotic songs beneath the bronze statue of Zheng He, the Chinese admiral who sailed to East Africa in the 15th century. Symbolism was impossible to miss. A century after the British built the Lunatic Express to control East Africa, China had built its replacement. But the celebration did not last long. Within 2 years, the financial reality started to sink in. Kenya had borrowed more than $3 billion from China for the Mombasa to Nairobi section. Then it borrowed another $1.5 billion for a 120-kilometer extension from Nairobi to Naivasha, a town in the Central Rift Valley. That second loan carried an interest rate of about 3.3% and fell due in January 2021. Together, these loans made China's Exim Bank Kenya's single largest external creditor. The railway was supposed to pay for itself. The plan was for freight revenue from the Mombasa port to cover operating costs and loan repayments. But the trains were not carrying enough cargo. The Africa Star Railway Operations Company, the Chinese subsidiary managing the line, never turned a profit. Kenya Railways reportedly lost about 1 billion Kenyan shillings per month. The government tried to force all containerized cargo from Mombasa port onto the standard gauge railway, but that order was struck down in court. By 2025, Kenya was spending over $1 billion per year just to service its standard gauge railway debt to China. In July of that year, standard gauge railway payments accounted for more than 81% of Kenya's total foreign debt service. The country's Auditor General revealed that Kenya owed China's Exim Bank $741 million in principal, $222 million in interest, and $41 million in penalties for the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year alone. Those penalty charges triggered outrage in Nairobi. The Auditor General called them avoidable expenditures that should never have been charged to public funds. And then came the contract leak. In late 2018, a letter from Kenya's Auditor General surfaced publicly. It warned that the Kenya Ports Authority's assets, including the Mombasa port itself, had been used as collateral for the SGR loans. The timing could not have been worse. Just months earlier, Sri Lanka had formally handed its Hambantota port to a Chinese state-owned company on a 99-year lease after failing to repay Chinese construction loans. The Hambantota deal became the global poster child for what critics called debt trap diplomacy, the idea that China deliberately lends money to countries that cannot repay and then seizes their strategic assets when they default. Suddenly, Kenyans were terrified that Mombasa would become the next Hambantota, and the parallels were hard to ignore. In both cases, a Chinese state-owned bank had financed a massive infrastructure project. In both cases, the borrowing country was struggling to generate enough revenue to service the debt. In both cases, the contract terms were hidden from the public. The Hambantota port had been built in the hometown of Sri Lanka's president at the time, Mahinda Rajapaksa, despite feasibility studies that questioned whether the project would ever attract enough shipping traffic to break even. The port failed, Sri Lanka could not pay, and in 2017, a Chinese state-owned company took a 70% stake in a 99-year lease. The debt trap diplomacy narrative exploded across Western media. The term itself was coined by an Indian scholar named Brahma Chalani in 2017 and picked up by American officials almost immediately. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned African leaders about countries that breed corruption and dependency. The story was clean and scary. China lends, countries collapse, China seizes. But was that really what happened? The leaked contract clauses seemed to confirm the worst fears. Clause 5.5 of the loan agreement stated that neither Kenya nor any of its assets was entitled to any right of immunity on the grounds of sovereignty from arbitration, suit, execution, or any other legal process. Another clause said the entire agreement was governed by Chinese law. In Clause 17.7, the confidentiality provision said Kenya could not disclose the terms to any third party without China's written consent. President Kenyatta denied that Mombasa port was collateral. The Chinese embassy denied it too, but neither side released the full contract, which only made the suspicion worse. Activist Okia Omtata challenged the government in court, demanding the documents be made public. He had been fighting since 2013, almost from the moment the deal was signed. In 2020, a Kenyan appeals court ruled that the entire SGR procurement process was illegal because it had not been open to public tender. The court found that the process was not fair, not equitable, not transparent, and not competitive. The company that conducted the feasibility study was the same company that won the construction contract. CRBC had essentially assessed whether the railway should be built, concluded that it should, and then hired itself to do the building. Kenyan courts called this a conflict of interest, but by then, the trains were already running. In July 2018, officials, business people, and companies were arrested on corruption charges involving land allocation for the railway. Among them were the chairman of the National Land Commission and the managing director of the Kenya Railways Corporation. The SGR, Kenya's most expensive project since independence, was not just controversial for its debt. It was controversial for how the money was spent and who profited along the way. It took until November 2022 for 3 of the loan contracts to finally be released. And when a team of researchers from the China-Africa Research Initiative at Johns Hopkins University analyzed them, they found something that changed the entire narrative. The Auditor General had made a mistake. The researchers discovered that Kenya's Auditor General had wrongly labeled the Kenya Ports Authority as a borrower responsible for repaying the loans. In reality, the Ports Authority was the railway's major customer, not a borrower and not collateral. The actual borrower was Kenya's National Treasury, which guaranteed repayment with sovereign revenue, the same way Kenya repays World Bank loans and Eurobonds. The sovereign immunity waiver that had caused so much panic turned out to be a standard feature of international commercial lending. The Johns Hopkins team found the same clause in loan contracts that Cameroon had signed with banks from Austria, India, Germany, Spain, Turkey, and the United Kingdom. One American lawyer quoted in the report said that leaving out a sovereign immunity waiver in an international commercial loan contract would be professional malpractice. So the Mombasa port seizure scenario was based on a misreading. But that does not mean Kenya got a good deal, not even close. The railway still ends in a cornfield, literally. The tracks run out at a station called Naivasha in the Rift Valley, surrounded by farmland. The planned extension from Naivasha to the Ugandan border at Malaba, roughly 468 kilometers of additional track, was supposed to be the whole point of the project. The original vision was a seamless rail network stretching from the Indian Ocean through Kenya, into Uganda, across Rwanda, and eventually reaching Burundi, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. The Mombasa to Nairobi section was never meant to be a standalone line. It was supposed to be the first chapter in a regional transformation. That extension was estimated to cost another $5 billion. China initially refused to fund it. President Kenyatta reportedly asked Beijing to provide half the money as a grant rather than a loan, an acknowledgement that Kenya was already drowning in debt from the first 2 phases. President Xi Jinping deferred the decision. For years, the extension stalled. The grand vision of an East African rail network connecting landlocked economies to the global supply chain stayed on paper. Without the extension, the SGR is like a highway that dead ends at a rest stop. Freight that should flow seamlessly from the port of Mombasa to landlocked countries in the interior still has to be offloaded and trucked. The economic promise of the railway, the whole reason it was built, depends on connections that do not yet exist. In 2024, China's Exim Bank signaled a willingness to fund the extension to Malaba. Kenya launched construction on the Naivasha to Kisumu to Malaba section in early 2025, with a consortium of Chinese companies contracted to build the line and recoup their investment through usage fees. But the financial terms of this new arrangement have not been made public either. Meanwhile, the railway itself is genuinely popular with Kenyans who ride it. Over 11 million passengers have taken the Madaraka Express since 2017, with an average seat occupancy rate above 95%. The trip from Mombasa to Nairobi takes about 5 hours compared to a full day on the old Colonial Railway, or 10 hours battling traffic on the highway. Freight trains carry double-stacked containers at 80 kilometers per hour, moving cargo that used to take days in under 8 hours. By November 2018, the line was operating 30 freight trains and 4 passenger trains per day. The 9 stations along the route are architectural landmarks, each one designed with motifs drawn from the surrounding region. The Mombasa terminus features concentric circles and a central tower representing a ripple in the ocean. The voice station is shaped like the letter V with raised arms. Matito Ande has sloping roofs inspired by Mount Kilimanjaro and the Chiulu Hills. The Amali station features a closed fist symbolizing unity. Kenyans take pride in these stations. They post photos from the train windows on social media. They bring their families for weekend rides to the coast. Kenyans use the railway every single day. They just wish they weren't paying this much for it. And they wish somebody had told them what was in the contract before it was signed. The debt trap diplomacy narrative is compelling because it is simple. China lends money to poor countries, builds their infrastructure, and takes their ports when they cannot pay. But the evidence does not support that clean story. The Hambantota port lease in Sri Lanka was not a debt for equity swap, according to Sri Lankan officials. The Mombasa port was never collateral for Kenya's railway loans, according to the contract text. And China has renegotiated loan terms with multiple countries, including Malaysia, which reduced its Belt and Road Rail project cost by billions. The real story is messier and, honestly, more troubling. Chinese state-owned companies and local politicians in borrowing countries often have aligned interests. The companies want massive construction contracts. The politicians want ribbon-cutting ceremonies before elections. President Kenyatta inaugurated the SGR just months before his 2017 re-election campaign. The feasibility studies were conducted by the same Chinese company that built the railway, a conflict of interest that Kenyan courts flagged but could not stop. The loans come with confidentiality clauses that keep citizens in the dark. The contracts are governed by foreign law. The interest payments pile up faster than the revenue rolls in. And when the money runs out, the question is not whether China will seize an airport or a port. The question is whether the country can afford schools, hospitals, and clean water while sending $1 billion a year to Beijing. Prominent Kenyan businessman Jimmy Wanjigi, who plans to run for president in 2027, has called the Madaraka Express one of the biggest cons Kenya has ever seen. He believes the country will end up paying more than double the original price tag by the time the debt is fully retired. Whether you call it a debt trap or just a bad deal depends on who you think was doing the trapping. China offered the money, Kenya took it, the contract was signed by both sides. But only one side wrote the terms, and only one side got to keep them secret. The Madaraka Express still runs every day between Mombasa and Nairobi. The trains are fast, the seats are full, and the views through Tsavo are spectacular. Giraffes still pass beneath the elevated viaducts. Elephants still cross through the wildlife tunnels. It is, by any measure, an extraordinary piece of engineering. But extraordinary engineering does not settle extraordinary debt. And the bill for this railway will shape Kenya's economy for a generation. If this story changed how you think about China's role in Africa, subscribe. Next week, we are looking at the country that said no to Beijing's money and what happened to them instead. That video is on screen now.